Thank you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to take this opportunity to most sincerely thank the organizers of this summit, the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences and the Pontifical Academy of Sciences for inviting me as one of the speakers during this important summit. Receive greetings from the people of Kenya and specifically from Vihiga County, where I am the governor. Vihiga County is one of the sub-national governments in Kenya. This summit is being held at a time when the world is grappling with the devastating effects of climate change. And it is therefore expected that the summit will provide a unique opportunity for sharing experiences on the best practices of climate adaptation and resilience among the key stakeholders and practitioners in the climate space. I also highly appreciate the commitment of the papacy on matters of climate change and environmental conservation, which has to a larger extent shaped the critical role played by religion on matters regarding climate change and environmental conservation. And it is indeed time to heed the Pope Francis' urgent call for action. Ladies and gentlemen, as we are all aware, climate change is the greatest environmental challenge facing the world today. As we discuss in this 3-day summit, we should remain cognizant of the following facts. 1, climate change is happening now, and its detrimental effects are evident within our lifetime. There is a chance that climate change will accelerate in ways that are not easily predictable, and many of the indeed changes may be irreversible. While climate change is a global phenomenon, its impact on countries and communities varies, with the developing countries being the most adversely affected. The global South bear a disproportionate burden of climate change impact due to low adaptive capacities associated with the low income. Ladies and gentlemen, at a global level, climate change has manifested itself in different ways, as clearly demonstrated this morning by the chair of IPPC. But in general, we are witnessing increasing temperatures. We are seeing increasing greenhouse concentration in the atmosphere. Other manifestations at global level include shift in rainfall patterns, increase in frequency and intensity of droughts and floods, heat waves and forest fires, tropical rainforests, tropical storms are also becoming more severe due to warmer oceans. Glaciers are melting at faster rates, leading to rising sea levels. Ladies and gentlemen, the global response to climate change is mainly anchored on the Paris Agreement, which is a legally binding framework for an international coordinated effort to tackle climate change. The agreement targets global warming of well before 2 degrees of pre-industrial average. As we are all aware, the implementation of the Paris Agreement is done through countries submitting their commitments in emission reductions known as National Determined Contributions, or NDCs. However, it should be noted that despite of these commitments, most countries have not put in mechanisms to attain these commitments, while some have submitted low commitments, which even if attained, cannot lead to reduction in global warming of below 2 degrees Celsius. There is also no credible monitoring mechanism to check on the fulfillment of these NDCs. Africa is one of the continents on the global South that accounts to approximately 2 to 3% of the global greenhouse emissions. But just like other regions dominated by LDCs and South small island states, suffers the most from the adverse impacts of climate change. The continent is highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, which threaten to stall or reverse the efforts towards food security, human health, and broad-based economic growth and development. Despite accounting for a small share of global greenhouse gas emissions, the continent bears the brunt of climate change, negatively impacting lives, livelihoods, and economies. The impacts of climate change are many, and they are all anchored in increasing temperatures, reduced agricultural food productivity, extreme weather events, and anomalies. And therefore, these impact very, very negatively to the lives of the people in Africa. Africa's response to climate change is anchored on Africa's Agenda 2063 framework, which calls for sustainable management of biodiversity, conservation of forests, land and water resources, disaster risk reduction and management. Let me now go back to Kenya, where I come from, and show what, as a country, we have been able to do to mitigate and put in place adaptation mechanisms. Kenya has witnessed instances of extreme climate events which have caused major human suffering and economic issues. Approximately 3 to 5% of our GDP annually is lost due to climate-related extreme events. Kenya has put up a mechanism to deal with climate change. And this has been anchored in our constitution, which guarantees right to healthy and clean environment, leading to the enactment of the following legal frameworks that govern climate change. We have the National Climate Change Response Strategy, which integrates climate change mitigation and adaptation in all government planning. We have the Climate Change Act, which was enacted in 2016, and I was the proponent of that act. And this act provides the development, management, and implementation and regulation mechanism to enhance climate change resilience and low carbon development to the sustainable development of Kenya. The act has recently been amended to provide a framework for exploration of carbon markets and inclusion of youth on the National Climate Change Council. We have also enacted National Climate Change Action Plan. Since 2010, the country has been preparing and implementing National Climate Change Action Plan on a 5-year cycle. As per the Paris Agreement 2015, Kenya, through her NDCs, has committed to abate the greenhouse emissions by 32% by 2030, relative to business as usual scenario, and is estimated to cost $62 billion. Ladies and gentlemen, anchored in Section 6 of the Constitution of Kenya 2010, the governance framework of Kenya constitutes the national government and 47 county governments, with both levels of government performing distinct but interrelated roles. Climate change impacts are felt mostly at grassroots level, where subnational government play a critical role in the implementation of resilience, adaptation, and mitigation initiatives. Chair, allow me hereafter to share a few insights on how subnational governments in Kenya play a critical role in climate action, giving practical example for Vihiga County, one of the 47 subnational governments in Kenya where I'm the governor. First, we have all the 47 counties have enacted a legal framework to ensure that climate change is incorporated in all its governance systems. We have also established climate change governance structures at the subnational level. Guided by the legal framework enacted, the subnational governments have established coordination structures at county and ward level. The county level governance structures, namely climate change planning and steering committees and directorates, provide strategic policy direction and technical coordination on climate change initiatives. Ward climate committees, which is the smallest or the lowest at the village level, provides an interface between the subnational governments and communities during planning and execution of climate change adaptation initiatives. We have also established a climate change financing framework and mobilization to ensure that we get funding from the counties. That is, subnational governments have set aside 1 to 3% of their development budgets into special funds known as county climate change funds, specifically for climate action. The financing locally led climate action is a critical program financed by the national and county governments as well as development partners in strengthening institutional capacities in counties and implementing community prioritized adaptation programs in clean energy, water infrastructure, climate smart agriculture, and environmental conservation with an aim of reducing climate-related risks. Currently, this is the only community-based climate resilience program being implemented in Africa. We are also strengthening the climate change adaptation and resilience planning framework. The strengthening of this climate change adaptation and resilience planning framework has been achieved through the use of the following participatory climate change planning tools, which include: 1, participatory climate change risk and vulnerability assessment; 2, participatory climate change action planning; and 3, participatory climate change information and early warning service planning. The planning tools guide the choice of community prioritized resilience investment projects which are implemented and their impact monitored at the community level. We also have put in place structures for strengthening monitoring, evaluation, reporting, and learning of climate action. The subnational governments in Kenya report annually to their respective assemblies about progress on implementation of climate action. As guided by the National Climate Change Act of 2016, subnational governments forward copies of their reports to the National Climate Change Directorate, which consolidates them for tracking contribution towards the nationally determined contribution. The above approach adopted by Kenya, where policy and legal frameworks have been formulated to guide climate action at national and subnational levels, have had a significant impact in the country's climate mitigation and adaptation initiatives. Further, the inaction of policy and legal frameworks at subnational levels, where community involvement in climate action is mainstreamed, has had and continue to have a major impact and boost on how climate change is being addressed at the community level. The approach has led to community awareness on the impact of climate change on their lives and livelihoods, and is helping them to formulate adaptation and resilience initiatives to address the same. Therefore, it is our conviction and recommendation that this approach should be adopted by the developing countries. It is gratifying to note that a number of African countries are benchmarking on how this system works in Kenya, with the latest one being Sierra Leone, which was in Kenya only recently to benchmark on the same. So that is what is happening in Kenya. As regards Vihiga, where I'm the governor, let me just briefly, okay, let me then give some concluding remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, as I wind up, allow me to make the following concluding remarks and recommendations. One, climate crisis is a global in nature with a diverse local impact. There is therefore need for leaders to join hands in seizing the unprecedented opportunity to accelerate global decarbonization while pursuing equality and shared prosperity. The unpredictable weather events and patterns in Africa, such as prolonged droughts, devastating floods, and out-of-season storms and wildfires, cause massive humanitarian crises with the detrimental impacts on economies, health, education, and peace and security, among other issues. Lastly, I wish to note that climate change is a global crisis, and therefore all of us must act now to control its catastrophic impacts and should build resilience. Thank you.